Recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. LaMalfa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this key meeting at a key time here on our supply chain and what that means for all American consumers. Covered a lot of good info today. I think we still really need to drill right down to what is it we can do that would be the most effective, most immediate relief for what's going on at the ports and the whole chain of getting these products out and that bottleneck done and getting things to the store shelves, whether you're talking about in the context of Christmas or just in the general terms of keeping food on the shelf and perishables from going bad, waiting to go, whether it's for export or, when you're talking trucking, just in general around the country. So, some of the things we talked about is, or are thinking about too, is that as a California member, we deal with things to an extra degree. We have AB 5, which was attempted to be passed here, known as the PRO Act, which basically is really zapped owner-operators of trucks. We have the California Air Resources Board phasing out trucks that are older than 2011 engines or 2010 model trucks. The DMV has a 2-month backlog at least on getting people truck drivers licensed. We have, what was mentioned a couple times, I think most recently by Ms. Spamberger, on getting more people that are the age 21 requirement, get them down to that age 18 requirement so they can do interstate trucking. The hours of service, we need some flexibility on that. We need to have whatever we can do at the federal level, and our governors and our state level folks look at some of these issues and say, can we at least put a variance on this for a period of time to get caught up? Weight limits on trucks. Can we put a variance on that for a while to deal with just getting through the backlog? Because we're all being harmed by what's going on. It's really harming our economy and the people that produce these products. And we're going to see, as has been talked about earlier in the committee, a shift of where these products are going to come from. So let me talk to Mr. Durkin about this. You spoke earlier about your markets, basically, and people will shift to buying things from EU or from New Zealand, Australia, whoever can supply this. Plus, please emphasize that a little bit for this committee.
Yeah. There's 3 primary dairy exporting countries. It's ourselves, U.S., the European Union, and New Zealand. And I gave an example in my testimony where we've had, the one customer where that actually is incurring significant air freight charges because they can't get to on a boat. And there's an expectation on their end that we pay for that, which we'll be unable to do. We're trying to do the best we can and with some pricing is there to kind of mitigate that, but the costs are significant. What the most concerning thing over the long term is the loss of that customer. And again, going to the European Union as they had indicated, and this will not be the first, it'll just be the start of this, and that's my concern on this. So,
what's the loss of that customer actually mean to an American consumer, do you think?
The loss of that is obviously millions of dollars in product that we were able to come back, but now what's going to happen from an American consumer standpoint, it's going to increase supply in the United States per se, but it's going to drive pricing down to make it very volatile. And what you're going to see is actually lower milk prices for the dairy farmer. That's also our concern because the big part of growth for dairy farmers is actually going to be exports.
So the dairy farmer won't be around very long at that rate.
It's a concern on our end for the viability of the dairy farmer.
When we're talking about the issues at the ports, once again, you mentioned earlier that the cost of a freight container, I think, was $5,500 just to use that container to fill with product. But things that are out of your control, the detention and demurrage fee, you said was up to $20,000, right?
That's correct.
And that's something you don't control, right?
That is not out of our control.
Is that something you even anticipate until it happens?
We cannot, until it rolls, until you get the actual invoice, you don't know that you're actually encouraging those charges, and we've actually had to hire temporary people to actually go and research those charges and to try to go back at the carriers to try to get rid of that. But it's been a challenge.
This is a lot like surprise medical billing, really. You get a surprise bill on your demurrage. And
that's a good analogy.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you really feel like it's your fault for that, or is it's more out of your hands with the shipping and the loading and all that, isn't it?
And absolutely not our fault because we have the goods on time at the port ready to go. As we've talked about, there's challenges on getting containers as well as chassis there, but we've worked very hard to be able to do that.
You mentioned, too, that, was it 70% of ships leave the U.S. with empty containers, or in some cases, no containers because they've left them on the dock because they're in a hurry to get back?
Correct.
Has the 24/7 port order helped to change that situation any?
The 24/7 port order was a suggestion for the ports to work towards that.
Suggestion.
Suggested,
So it's
yeah.
not in place yet?
Correct. It's not in place yet. I think the reality of this is, I know they have a union negotiation, they have labor negotiations coming up in the springtime, and they'll have to probably work through that. They'll have to hire people and obviously train people. In our mind, this is 6 to 12 months out at best.
If,
The gentleman's time
My
is-
time's out, but I would hope the panel, in other questions, would you emphasize what things we could be fixing right now to get results right now in other questions? Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, and if you could provide those in writings back to him, we'd appreciate